before I have someone on, I go on YouTube and I'll get just a little feel, like I'll just go research some history just to kind of get into a Glacier mode. So I was watching your Glacier stuff, but I was also watching you work because you told me this in person.
Yeah.
In 90, whatever it was, I saw you that you did jobs as your real name, and you worked with the Great Muta.
Yeah.
So I mean, what millions of people worked with the Great Muta, has been working for decades. But what was it like working with the Great Muta in 1989?
It's like I texted you yesterday. It was exciting and terrifying all at the same time. But and once again, we were fortunate. RD and I were fortunate because we just come out of college, so we were still in good shape. We were young, relatively healthy. I had a couple injuries in college, but we were. And during that time, that was the big guy era. So we were both about 250. We weren't super big, but we weren't small either. And we had learned from football. I learned from wrestling. From martial arts and football, and it carried on to wrestling. Is the thing that you and I always talk about. We talked about for years is our fundamentals. Fred and Rick both worked with us, but mainly Fred taught us fundamentals. He taught us because he was a really good amateur wrestler, which I didn't even know until he started training us. And now he's a wrestling coach up in North Florida, one of the high schools up there. But he was just big. Fundamentals. Your fundamentals have to be good. And I remember, I don't know if it's him that said it, but I just remember someone along the way early on in my career saying that if your fundamentals are good, yes, you may not have the most exciting match on the card, but at least no one will be able to pick your match apart and say, oh, his headlock looked like crap, or his armbar looked like crap. You can build off of that. And go ahead.
And you always have a spot. If you're good at the basics, they can always use you.
Yeah, because you can always, you hope that somewhere along the way you kind of learn how to get that it factor, the way you learn the career, because you take all that, and if you can add the charisma to it, and hopefully you can draw money and make money. Anyway, Tommy Rich, really, I connected with Tommy Rich on some shows, and he really liked me and RD a lot. And so this was summer of '89, I believe, is when that match with Muta happened. So that was 2 years. I've been in business 2 years, and he asked me if I wanted to do it, and he said, look, you're off for the summer. You got, you already got your paycheck from teaching. He goes, this is just bonus money. I was just like, he goes, but it's a lot of pressure, and I was like. He said, I told him first, I don't know if he said, you can do it. I'm telling you, you can do it. He said, I wouldn't put you out there and put my name behind you if I didn't think you could do it. And that's my favorite quote ever that my college trainer gave me, athlete trainer, Jim Madalino gave me. I'm big on quotes, my number one favorite quote in the entire universe. And I've given it to Dallas. He's used this a lot because, people say that it's not what you know, it's who you know. Well, my athlete trainer in college gave me another layer of that I feel is 100% true. He would always say, it's not what you know, it's not who you know, it's who's willing to say they know you, who's willing to put their name and reputation on the line to give you a leg up. And that's what Tommy Rich did for me. He really did. And I couldn't have gotten in at that level at that time, and but Tommy got me in. And then first match I did was that Sunday night in Albany Civic Center in Albany, Georgia. I wrestled Butch Reed. And I was of course terrified. Nicest guy in the world in the locker room. I'm thinking, but he'll turn into a monster out of the ring and kill me. But he didn't. Right. We had a great match. He hit me with that big flying shoulder off the top rope, and that was one of those matches that was an aha moment for me. It was just like, wow, like this is what it's like to be in the ring with a real pro in the prime of his career. Because like I said, I had an opportunity to learn from some real pros, but they were all in the kind of the twilight of their career, and but someone who could really move and who could really take my head off if he wanted to, and he did. Right. He really took care of me. And so anyway, he kind of gave, which I didn't know at the time, he kind of gave Tommy the thumbs up, like, hey, the kid did pretty good. So Tommy, they called me, booked me for TV like 3 days later. I think it was a Wednesday, and at Center Stage in Atlanta, Georgia. So I show up. I have no idea who I'm going to be working with. Of course, I found out real quick. But and a big reason why I think that they booked me with Muta was because of my martial arts background. And during that time, people weren't used to seeing kicks come flying at their head. So most people didn't feel comfortable taking that stuff, even though from someone like Muta, who was obviously world class, athlete, martial artist. But So I remember Gene Anderson was the guy backstage, Ole's brother, who and he was the one who tells me who I'm wrestling with, and I ended up only conversing with Gary Hart. I never even really talked with Muta for that first match, and other than we we stood together, and but Gary was the one who really just kind of just we kind of just laid things out for me and said, here's what it'll be, this, be this, be this, and so I was ready to go. And I remember thinking, like, once I got it, I did the typical no entrance, just the faceless opponent. And I go into center stage and I'm walking out there. And first of all, even at that point, center stage was a big deal, because it's even a bigger deal today, and because it's just an iconic place. And it is a very cool place for wrestling, the way it's built, and so I'm in the ring. I got Tommy Young as the referee, legendary referee. I've got Gary Hart managing Muta, who I was such a huge fan of Gary Hart. And then I've got Jim Ross and Michael Hayes doing commentary. And I'm just, I'm scared to death, that I'm like, don't screw up. And I got Tommy Rich, pitching for me. He's the guy that got me the spot. So I'm like, I can't make Tommy look bad. I can't make me look bad. I got, hopefully but luckily things went well. And the match, everything went really well. And they were happy with it. And they ended up putting me with him a good bit over the next, over that summer. And then I believe, that was 89. I believe I went back in 90 during the summer of 1990 and did more TV and just kind of that enhancement role, but man, I worked with everybody, Mike. They put me with everybody. And it was, I worked with Terry Funk, I worked with Samoan SWAT team. I mean, the Twin Towers, everybody. It was the greatest learning experience of my life, and it was really, I put the personal pressure on myself, but honestly, like if I would have somehow screwed things up, nobody's gonna remember me, at that point, but I do remember Nick Patrick saying to me way back then, he said, because there came a time, my buddies, but this is way before any social media. So here I am losing every time I go on TV, and I was living in Valdosta at the time. So it's like I'd go back home, and man, I was teaching and coaching football, and all these old school football coaches, man, they would just razz me to death. It was just like, I remember one of my coaches, my fellow coaches, saying, it's like, man, he hit you so hard, my TV went off. But I had to. I was willing to, because I kept thinking, okay, big picture. This is what you have to do.
Sure.
And back when we came up, that really was, the normal. What you had to work your way up. You had to prove that you were humble enough to do that before they were going to even consider putting you in a higher spot. But yeah, it was just one of the things where it was a great experience for me to work with all those people. And I remember even the Samoan SWAT team back then, they would always smash the pineapple on some of the guys' faces afterwards. That's when, Paul E was with them, Paul Heyman. And I just remember, for whatever reason, I don't know why, but they never picked me to smash the pineapple on my face. And I was just very, very thankful for that. So that's kind of a quick recap of all that stuff.
Yeah, I did a lot of jobs for the WWF in the early 90s. It's scary.
Yeah,
it's intimidating. You're literally giving someone your body, and you don't fight back. You don't have a choice in the match. Yeah.
And there's some people that were, that took liberties that, we all kind of knew who it was. So when you saw your name against that person, you're like, oh.
Yeah. Exactly.